Okay, so we should be recording now so that anybody else who needs to refer to this Redesign New Contract training will have it available. So I sent everybody an agenda. Hopefully you saw that in the email recently this morning. And I included some links in there as well to these resources that I have displaying on the agenda, the new contract chapter of the manual, the new contract checklist that's in the manual, and the public shared reports library. I also gave you a link to the LACA purge worksheet, which we'll talk about a little closer to the end of the meeting. But the first items that we listed as resources, hopefully everybody is familiar with the USPSR manual now. If you pull up the manual, which we have a link on our website also, or you can compare from inside the software. And if you navigate to the new contract section of the manual, this is one of those links that I sent you this morning. This is very good information. It explains the entire new contract area, the option of the menu that we'll be looking at today. Gives you some very good information. And you can even see that it's being updated regularly. So this screen was last modified just 2 hours ago. The second link that I gave you was to the new contract checklist, which I have open here. But if you were navigating through the manual, that's in the appendix. And you select checklists, and then you see all of these checklists, and the new contract checklist is the one that I sent you the link to. So a lot of what we go through today will just be walking through the steps in this checklist. Like we'll look at job calendars first, and then we'll go into the new contract menu and talk about each of those options. And we'll talk about the reports that are available to you and what to do with non-contract compensations. And then we'll have a little discussion at the end about the timing of your contract purge or contract activation. So this is kind of like the same as our agenda, kind of like what we're going to walk through today. So I do have a database that we've tried to scramble that I'm going to demo from today. And the other resource that I listed was the public shared reports library. I don't know if you guys are using that a lot, but from within the software, you can click help at the top right and select public shared reports library. Click this link, and this gives you reports. It doesn't look like it's been updated super recently, but as recently as April, so they could post new reports out here any day. But these are reports that the UAT group have either written for districts at district requests or ITC request, or other ITCs or districts have requested be shared across the state. So I just wanted to make sure you knew there could be reports out here that could help you. Like if I do a Control F and just look for the word contract on this screen, you see that there's a new contract compensation worksheet, a new contract payroll account, an original payroll account report, and a detailed contract compensation report. So these are reports that are not necessarily in your software by default. But if you're looking for a report and you're not finding what you want, you could look here. You can see an example of the report here. You can click the name of the report here to download it. Then you can upload it into your report manager, see if it's something that you want, and it might help you along the way. So I just want to remind you about this being out here. So back in our software, if we go ahead and start looking at stuff for processing your new contracts, the first step on that new contract checklist is to update your job calendars for the new year. So we did talk about this at a payroll roundtable, so most of you have probably already done this. Then we had a little caution that we talked about at the most recent payroll roundtable related to calendars. So if you go to core job calendars, you just want to enter all of your information for the new school year. And we'll talk about that caution again here in a second. But your compensation records, as you build new compensations for the new year, they're going to use these calendars to count the number of work days that your employees are being contracted for next year. So you can find an existing calendar if you haven't done this already, and you can click the edit button. So this is an existing calendar that has days on it for the current year that we're in right now. And if I look ahead, I don't have work days on it yet for next year. So you can go one by one and right click and enter work days, or you can use this start and end date and enter a range of dates. And you can say I want from my date range beginning to end to be a work day, a holiday, calamity day, makeup day, or none. So I'm going to pick work day to populate the majority of my work days really quickly. You can check the box to include weekends if you're working on a calendar that should include weekends, but typically that's going to be unchecked. Then you click mass update, and I typed the wrong year there. So let's try that one more time. The error message just told me that I typed June 30th of 2020 instead of June 30th of 2021. So once I fix that, the system is going to go out and populate all of these work days on this calendar for me. And after those days are populated, we can look at the number of days that it added and go through and right-click days to change certain days to holidays or to non-work days if there were some that were updated that shouldn't be. And this is taking a little time, so I don't know if that's because I had the error. Up there it goes. So now if I want to look and see what I did, I can change my custom date range up here. And it shows that I just quickly added 261 work days. So I would need to go through and figure out which work day people are going to have off if you're only contracting them for 260, or maybe you're a district that pays for 261 during the calendar years in which there are 261 work days. But if you're a district that instead gives a non-work day throughout the year to bring them down to 260, you would go find whatever that day is, right click it, and change it to none. Then your count shows 260. You could also, wherever you're observing holidays, right click and change it to a holiday, or maybe this is my non-work day, but it will give you a count up here, the total number of work days, total number of holidays, number of calamity and makeup days, so that you can verify right here at the top that you're done with this calendar. When you're done, you can click save. And then when you return to your grid, like in Classic, you were able to copy from one calendar to another calendar, and you still have that option in the redesign. So you can click the copy button up here at the top to then say, okay, I have my base calendar built for 260 day. So for that same date range, I want to copy this to several other calendars. So whatever those calendars would be, you just select them here from the list and hit copy. And then those calendars are going to be updated with those new days just the same. So after you've went through and updated holidays and everything, then you copy to other calendars, and then you would go find that calendar that you just copied to and edit it as needed to make any changes that are unique to that specific calendar, if that calendar has different holidays or different work days, and then save your changes. If you need to create a brand new calendar that doesn't exist in your grid list, then that's what the create button is up here for at the top. But for the most part, you're probably editing existing calendars to add new days for FY21. The mass change option can be used throughout the year to update calamity days or makeup days. But let's say I just copied all of those calendars. I copied my 260 day to my admin and my treasurer calendar, and I forgot about a certain holiday. So I forgot about updating like New Year's Eve as a holiday. So maybe I quickly want to update all of those calendars to reflect that holiday that I forgot instead of going through one by one and finding them. So, and if I can find admin on this list, then I hit save and that quickly updates that date on those calendars. So viewing the calendar, I now see that holiday that I added. Also, if you don't want to use the custom date range up here in this day totals grid for reviewing your next year's calendars, there is also a job calendar report available on the reports menu. And if you used this a couple months ago, it has changed slightly. They've added a page break and they've added the ability for you to print the default calendar, because previously I don't think the default calendar would print because it didn't have any work days. But you could come in here and verify your calendars as well. And I'll just select those ones that we just worked on. Generate the report so you can see what this looks like. And then you should be seeing the job calendar report on my screen. So month by month, the number of work days, holidays, calamity days, or makeup days, and then a grand total for that calendar at the bottom, then a page break, which they just recently added, then your second calendar with calendar totals at the bottom, a page break, and the third calendar. So this is good for verifying to make sure you have the correct number of work days, holidays, non-work days, or if you want to print and send this out to district employees so that they can see their work days that are scheduled for next year. So any questions on creating your job calendars for next year?
I have a question on the default calendar. Do you have to go ahead and add it in with no work days, or do you just leave it? Do you have to set it up as calendars from
As long
July
as
through June?
As long as you had a default calendar that imported from Classic, so you have the base of the default calendar, then it's already there. So I did not build a default calendar per se or edit it for FY21, but when I run this report, you can see that there's every month there, July, August, September, and so forth for the date range that I ran with no work days, no holidays. So in the software under core job calendar, my default calendar imported from Classic. I did not edit it to add any non-work days. It's just there. You don't really have to do anything to add future blank months.
Okay.
Good question. I mean, in Classic, you had to create each month on the default calendar, so that's one benefit of the redesign. Once the calendar exists, it's kind of going to be fine itself going forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on the job calendar step of the checklist? So the next step on the checklist after job calendars is going directly into processing new contracts and looking at all of those options. Before we do that, SSDT did share a tip. Yes?
I'm sorry. Were you going to talk later about what was mentioned at the round table about not having August
Okay,
days
thank
in?
you. Thank you. I did want to talk about it here and then we will talk about it later too. So thank you for reminding me. So the caution that we discussed at the June payroll roundtable was if you're building your calendars for FY21 and if you have a final pay on your FY20 contract that, let's say your final pay on the contract is August 31st for a date range of August 16th through August 31st. And that's the final pay of the FY20 contract. If you have work days on like that teacher calendar during that date range for the new school year, then the system is actually going to count those days and add them to the old contract because you're paying on the old contract still. And there isn't really a purge ahead option that exactly mimics Classic. In the redesign, you can activate your compensation records at any time. So they're sitting out there waiting to be paid, and they'll get pulled into a payroll based on their compensation start date, falling in between your initialization period beginning and ending dates. However, in Classic, when we used to purge ahead because we wanted the new contract there for those new work days, but we're still paying on the old, the system would give the days, redesign will give the days to the old contract and pay on both contracts if you purge ahead and have both contracts sitting there because you have pay remaining on the old that still needs paid and it's sitting there, so it's going to get the days. And then the pay on the new, because the contract start date, because their work day is in the end of August, is going to actually make it get paid on also. So in the redesign, there really isn't a purge ahead right now. They're talking with programmers about it right now. So one option would be with your calendars to think about if you have any calendar work days that kind of overlap the old contract year, the beginning of next year's calendar work days fall during the final pay of the old FY20 contract, then maybe you don't want to put those August days on there now. I would still build them as you're building your calendars and then just make sure you get the right dates, like the right days during the date range, and then take them off the calendar temporarily. Then run your final pay of the FY20 contract and then add them back in, and then do additions on the first pay of the contract to go back and grab those work days so that they go on the right contract year.
We recommend putting them on to begin with first so that you can verify that your calendars do have the correct number of days for the year, because we want you to make sure that they are built for the correct number of days. And I love this grid up here because it tells you how many that you have in the fiscal year, and or you can run the report either way. But when we found that out, it's like, this is the best option at this time to either remove the August days or do an additions.
I was going to say, this is Stacy, sorry. I was going to say, can't we run, I still call it I&I Cal, but when we initialize payroll, can't we run separate dates for separate pay groups like we used to in Classic, just depending on when, like my teachers come back August 12th, but I would normally run payroll the 1st through the 15th. Like last year, I just ran it the 1st through the 11th, and then on the 31st pay, I would run it the 12th through the 31st to capture those 3 work days. Can we still not do that?
Yes, you can. So that's the other option. So
okay.
There are 2 options. One is playing with your calendars if you don't want to do additions, or if additions for some reason would not work. If additions work, yes, on your final pay of the old contract, you can make sure that the period ending date excludes the first work day. So like in this on the screen, I would make sure my period ending date is the 17th or earlier,
Right.
and then do additions. So like on my first pay of September to come back and grab August 18th on. So yes, that is still an option.
Okay.
If
I
you
just
can
wanted to
make
make
it
sure.
work, if you can make it work by planning your additions, then you can build your full calendars and not worry about the calendar workaround. The calendar workaround was just one suggestion.
Okay.
Carrie, this is Gail. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what Stacy was saying. So for the, our last pay is August 31st for teachers and aides. So I could run that last pay period from August 16th through the 17th.
Right, depending
And
on your
then
first work day, yes. If that excludes your
ours is
first.
ours is the 12th. So that would not work. I was looking at the calendar you had on the screen.
So in that instance, so you have a pay on the 14th,
15th,
that
well,
in that INI-Cal, the period beginning and ending date would typically be the 1st through the 14th?
the period would be the 1st through the 15th with payday
Okay.
on the 14th.
So in that instance, that's the final pay of the FY20 contract on the 15th
The 31st.
is the
The
final
31st.
pay?
Yeah.
Okay, so on that 15th payroll, which is falling on the 14th, you could potentially run your additions like the 1st through the 8th or something, and then on the 31st, you could run like the 9th through the 11th, and then on September 15th, you could run the 12th through September 15th.
Oh, okay.
So if you wanted to leave your calendars built, you would have to do additions multiple times. You'd have to do it on the second to last pay, and on the final pay, and on the first pay of the new contract. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
And that would
so
work.
for September. So for September 15th, I
Because-
can't do additions for August 12th through the September 15th.
You can.
Okay.
So is that because September 15th is your first pay of the new contract?
Yes.
Right. So then on September 15th, you would want to run August 12th through September 15th and give them a ton of days all at once.
Okay.
And
Okay.
you'll want to think about what that will do to anybody who is SERS.
Yep. They won't like that.
Right.
ESERS won't like that.
Right. STRS would not see days till the end of the year, so that would be fine. But right before you do that, think through the impact on ESERS.
Yes. And there's no way to mass delete August days for multiple calendars.
You could go to a calendar and do like, I want August to be blank. So you could say on this calendar, make all of August be blank, and then save it. And then you could go to the next calendar to do the same thing. Or the other option would be the mass change button, but this is date by date.
Right.
So this is not a date range, but you could say, I know August 18th was a day on the calendar as a work day, and I would hope you could update it to none. Let's try that, because none is not an option, so it might not let me do none. Let's do this on that admin.
The other thing you could do is a mass copy of the month of
Month of
August from the one calendar to the other calendars.
So yeah, the mass change doesn't work because there's no none on the list, but you could say, after we cleared that teacher calendar, copy the clear month of August to my other calendars. So we'll go look at those two calendars. And it didn't clear it.
Mhm.
What was
I
my,
just have a lot of calendars, so I'm trying to think of the best way to do this, as you can see from that list.
I did save my changes. So it must not overwrite a blank month over a month with days.
Oh,
Unless did somebody see where I did something wrong? So that teacher calendar 1 was blank in August. And I'm doing 2020. And let's do and that didn't work. So that's a good idea in theory, but we might have to submit a ticket to SSTT and ask if that should have worked. Because it does not appear to have cleared the calendar. So I'll make a note of that.
I'm writing that down for you, Carrie.
Okay, thank you. So if that becomes an option, we'll send an email out of it and if they agree that it's a bug, we'll let you know. I just don't know how quickly they could fix that or change that functionality in the software, if they could do that as a
Carrie,
quick release or not.
try one more thing. Try copying that to E1, starting with August 1st to say September 5th or September 15th. And because there's work days in September, would it copy any of it? Or would it copy it then? No. Okay.
I can even refresh too and make my grid reload and make sure it's not pulling old data. No.
Okay. Yeah, I wrote this down.
Okay, so we will submit a ticket and find out if that's a bug and let you guys know what they say. So as of right now, it would either be opening each calendar and editing the date range to clear it out to a non-work day. Or, yeah, that's probably it as of the current functionality. Or doing additions, or letting your calendars exist as they are and thinking through the additions option instead. So on the LACA website, I did send you the link to the purge worksheet that you guys are probably familiar with from Classic, but we recommend you fill out as you're planning when to purge your new contracts. And I'm sorry, purge is the old terminology and it's probably really activate in this software, but we still think this would be good for you to plan out per pay what you're doing. Are you doing additions when initializing the pay or not? What's your period beginning and ending going to be? For which pay groups? And when are you activating contracts? I know it says purge before, but you're activating contracts before which pay date? I still think this would be a good worksheet for you guys to fill out as you plan when you're activating contracts throughout the summer months for which pays and when you're doing additions, and if so, what those additions date ranges are. So that's on the LACA website if you would like to start thinking that through. Any other questions about job calendars? So the next step on the checklist is to go to processing new contract and start pulling in your new contracts. One tip that SSDT had before going to that step was if you have any employee that is changing pay groups, they recommend that you go to core position and change that first. The pay group resides on the position, not on the compensation record. And when you're in the new contract grid, you're working with compensation records. So if you had somebody who was changing pay groups, then you would go to core position, edit their position. So if I edit Tim Allen's active position, you could change the pay group on here to a different pay group. Then when he pulls into the new contract area, he'll be in his new pay group. So that was just a tip that SSDT mentioned before going to processing new contracts. So if you go to processing new contracts, you're going to see 3 tabs across the top. You have new contract maintenance, mass copy compensations, and import new contracts. So the new contract maintenance tab is helpful if you're creating one new contract individually or doing a mid-year contract change. And this is also if you use the mass copy tab or the import tab, this is where all of that information is going to populate to. So this is also where you're going to come to review all of your new contracts as they exist in the software, or to edit existing ones if you need to make individual changes, to delete certain ones. If maybe you've built somebody's new contract and then they resign over the summer, you can delete from here individually or in bulk, and you can activate from here. So first, just looking at an individual contract, if you had one that you wanted to build by itself, you would click copy to start that process, and you would find your employee, and you have the option of the mid-year contract changes or the new contract. So at this time of year, you're going to be building a new contract. You click create, and then you update all of this information for the new year. So you can see that the system went ahead and updated my compensation start date in anticipation of what it thinks it's going to be, because last year my compensation start date on this compensation was July 1st of 19. So it's going ahead and saying July 1st of 20. So it is trying to help you, but you would update any information. So contract amount, contract obligation, pays in contract if this person were a partial year hire last year and you needed to update their pays to be a full year. You can change the job calendar here if they're changing job calendars. You can enter a description for the compensation record or a label. And I think the label is the one that Mary references in an EMIS mass change throughout the year to make sure it is updated in some way reflecting the new year.
Yes, the label would help more than the description, because we do have to do mass updates to change last year's contracts to no longer report to EMIS, and mass update this year's contracts to report to EMIS. And so having something that is common among all of the current contracts helps you to be able to filter on grids and to be able to do the mass updates much easier.
And I went ahead and put in FY21. You could see me changing back and forth of thinking what I was going to do, because there is one mass change somewhere that I forget exactly which one it was, but I'll probably come across it as we go through this training. But if you had like 20-21 in a certain field, and I don't even remember if it was this field, but one mass change was calculating that to equal a -1. So depending on what you're going to do with this field, it might be safer to not confuse the system and think you're trying to do a formula. But I forget what the mass change was that somebody was referring to, that it was doing that. So you could put in a label here that of some sort to identify all of your contracts that they're for the FY21 year to do the mass change more easily. If not, we'll figure out a different way based on like compensation start dates, compensation stop dates. And in redesign, the compensation stop date is important. If I save this screen without having one, it's not going to force me to enter one. But the redesign is calculating contract work days based on this compensation start and stop date. So by you entering a stop date, it's going to make sure everything's accurate. So if you don't have stop dates, when you build your New Year's calendar for FY22 and you open this, you may see 520 workdays instead of 260 workdays on a compensation record in your live files, because if there is no stop date, the system is just going to keep counting workdays. So the compensation stop date is not a required field that it's going to force you to enter it, but it really is something you should think of as a required field in the redesign, because it is used for so many calculations and behind the scenes things in redesign.
Carrie, it's Stacy.
Uh-huh.
I have a question about that. In the past, I've ran into trouble because we process attendance 2 weeks behind, that if the compensation stop date is on there and I'm trying to pull them into, say, the next payroll, it won't let me. Like, it will not pull in that person for compensation. So I'm just wondering, like, take somebody like myself that I just, or even say the teachers last pay is going to be August 14th, yet I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. I just know if there's a compensation stop date and I'm trying to put attendance, I've had issues with this where I've had to remove stop dates so that they'll pull into payroll.
And there could be instances like that. You maybe have encountered something that could be a reason to not have a stop date, but like if you read the manual, it says it's required. I know the manual doesn't cover every scenario. And I know for EMIS reporting, there were some issues this year when calendars got built. Everybody's days doubled for the EMIS submission. But these compensation start and stop dates impact whether this compensation record is pulling in to your payroll based on the initialization start and stop date. So by me building June 30th of 21, that's me saying that I will not be paying on this job past June 30th for my period
Okay.
beginning and ending date. Now, if I had attendance to post against this job after that, could it be posted against the new compensation instead?
and that's what I'm thinking is going to have to happen, because somebody like myself, my current job, I'm going to have a compensation stop date of June 30th. And when I initialize payroll, I'm going to initialize this pay group for the 16th through the 30th. But when I look at the actual attendance in July, it will have to post against the new record. I guess if anybody's, where I've ran into problems is with those people that have either passed away or resigned, or don't have any pay left. They've gone into like a dock situation.
So really a more rare scenario than everybody. I was worried it was everybody in your database. So it's not really impacting the typical continuing employee.
Right.
Okay. So in those instances, we might have to do something like remove a stop date on those temporarily to try to get the attendance to post or something. Yes.
Yes.
At the time.
Yes, and that's what I've done in the past. It's just, it creates a headache because it won't pull them into payroll if I have a compensation stop date on there, say prior to, yet I'm trying to pay them off. It won't pull them in.
But if you're still paying on that job, then the compensation stop date should be active.
Yes, it's where I ran into problems. It's say those employees that leave, and I have one more pay remaining. It won't pull them into payroll because of the compensation stop date.
Do you really have a pay amount remaining to pay them, or do you just have their attendance to post after the fact?
I'm trying to think of an example that I've ran into in the past, but it definitely affects attendance. Now that we're going into our second year, it shouldn't affect very many. But I know I ran into problems where, because of the payroll lag, I cannot put a compensation stop date on employees if I still have one pay remaining.
And so going forward, we'll call us if you encounter that, and we'll look at it with you specifically.
Okay.
But this compensation stop date in theory should reflect basically like the last work day, if they're working right through the end of their contract, or the last period ending of their summer pays. So like on those teachers who are getting stretch pay over the summer but they're not working, the compensation stop date should be an August date, the last time that you want their pay to pull into your period beginning and ending dates of a payroll. Does that make sense?
It does. So for our teachers that are with us this year, their last pay is going to be August 14th. Their current compensation record should actually have an August 11th stop date on it because the new contract begins August 12th. And when I run payroll, I don't think it's going to pull. I guess that's my fear because I've ran into that in the past. It will not pull them into payroll because I have an 8/11 stop date.
It should if your period beginning to ending date covers the range that includes August 11th. It should pull in.
Okay.
If your period beginning and ending date were like August 12th to the 14th, it should exclude it. If you're August 1st through the 12th, it should pull in anything through the 11th.
Okay.
So if you encounter that it's not, please call us because that is how it is supposed to function. If it is not functioning that way in every scenario, then we need to report it.
Okay.
Carrie,
It's also supposed to function, Stacy, that if you have the new contract active that starts on the 12th and it's within your period beginning and ending, not only will it pay off, and this is the problem with why it doesn't do the purge ahead correctly, it will pay off the contract that ends on the 11th, plus it will pay the contract that starts on the 12th.
Gotcha.
And so that's why this year, like the time you click that activate button might be a little more time sensitive than we've always mentioned. Timing of purge is very flexible in the redesign. You can purge ahead and it'll pull in at the right pay. But the purge timing is going to be very important, or your additions date ranges. Like if you ran an additions date range through August 11th, it would only pull in this one. And then if on the next pay you did additions to go back to the 12th, in theory, it should pull in the right one.
Yeah. And I think that's probably where I've ran into trouble before. Like, say you take a full-time employee that leaves in the middle of the pay period, and say I put a stop date on their compensation record so that the number of work days was correct on the screen. When I initialized payroll, I never changed the dates for, say, one specific person, and they wouldn't pull into payroll. But that was because the initial period was like the full, say, 14, 15 days. So.
Were you changing the compensation stop date, or were you changing the calendar stop date in that case?
The compensation stop date so that the number of days worked would be correct.
That should be the calendar stop date. If the person left during a payroll.
I think it needs to actually be both in the
I think
redesign.
I was going to say,
okay.
I think so
Because
too.
these
Okay.
contract work days are just being calculated based on these two
Right.
fields.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Because I thought that would, the calendar stop date would influence that also.
I
think
put it on both, but it's the compensation stop date that calculates the work days.
the calendar stop date is in redesign more used for like EMIS reporting, ODJFS reporting, other report generation programs, not this calculated field up here, contract work days, I believe. So there was also a question in chat. So we can just add the compensation stop date to our new contract upload worksheet, right? Yes, I believe so. And we'll see importing contracts here in a little bit. And when I run that report to start building an upload file, we'll just make sure that contract stop date, the compensation stop date's in there, but I believe it is. So you could quickly add compensation stop date to everybody in your import file. Yes, I believe so.
Carrie, this is Sophie. I'm just a little confused on the compensation stop date. Would that be the last date they're supposed to be on payroll for this contract?
Yes. So like if I'm building the new one for FY21, that's why this 260-day person I was entering July 1st through June 30th. It's calculating the contract work days, but it's influencing when I'm going to get paid. So if I am running payroll, my initialization date ranges really need to be accurate to my work days in a way in order for this to all work out correctly.
So the compensation, is it your last work day of the contract or your last pay date of the contract?
It's in theory, it's the last workday, which should also match like your period ending date of their last pay date. It is not the pay date itself. So if I paid this on July 5th for a period of June 16th through June 30th, the June 30th should be counting my last workday. And it's going to pull into that July 5th payroll because my period beginning and ending dates include June 30th.
Sophie, for your teachers that are paid over the 12 months, but they only work up through June, the compensation stop date would, in theory, be the last day before the first workday of next year's contract.
Okay.
So because this date range is doing two things, it's calculating the contract work days on the compensation, So it has to be accurate to their work days, but it's also controlling when they're pulling in. So if they're getting summer pays, then the contract stop date, if this were a teacher, let's say, if this were a teacher, then my contract work days would be falling from maybe August to June, but I would still be putting a compensation date out in August before they start back to the new next year, so that I still continue to pull into payrolls over the summer.
So say their last pay date is August 16th of this year. What date would I use there?
This is not the pay date, it's your initialization beginning and ending dates.
So the
So when you
period that
run August 16th, what date range do you run it for?
the last date would be August 9th. It would be July 29th through August 9.
What is the first workday of the teacher calendar for next, when do they start in August?
The 24th or something like that. Let me see here.
So it at least has to include the August 9th,
August
or
9th.
so that it pulls in, but it can include any of those non-work days up through the start of the next contract, probably.
Their
Because
first
it wouldn't,
workday is the 24th of this year.
And what's their first payday?
The 30th.
Okay, so they're going to be getting a whole pay before they even start working.
Yes.
Okay.
Which we said the auditor said they would not fine us on that, so we wouldn't be cited.
and we will, if you guys fill out the purge worksheet, or if you do that on your own form, your own spreadsheet somehow, if you don't use our purge worksheet, if you want us to review that, you can gladly send that over to us, whatever your plans are for all of these dates, and when should be the last pay on a contract, first pay on a contract, and what date range you want to use. And if you're questioning compensation stop dates, you can send that to us and we'll look at it with you and hopefully get this planned out so that there are no issues.
Okay.
So thank you for all the questions. That was very good conversation. Before we move on a little bit, are there more questions about compensation start and stop dates? So you would update anything else on this compensation that record that is changing. If retirement hours or hours in day are changing for the individual, those are there. You want to make sure stretch pay is check marked on the jobs as applicable. If your district uses the salary schedule fields, those are here for you to update as needed. So any field that's changing, go ahead and update that. There is a calculate button up at the top. So once you think you have everything entered, if you click that, you will hopefully receive only green messages, which means everything was correctly validated. It gives you a message saying the unit amount was calculated and the pay per period was calculated. If you X out of that, you can also see that the contract work days filled in for this individual, which I had kind of like a teacher date range in there on a July 1st to 6/30 contract person of the calendar. So if I calculate again, then I can see 260 work days during the date range that I entered. You can verify the pay per period and make sure that matches your calculations, and verify the unit amount, make sure that matches your calculations. If everything looks good, you go ahead and save. Okay, so sorry, I was looking at my notes just to see if there was anything else I wanted to mention about this screen. If you X out of that, then you can see that this new contract is out here in my maintenance area. So I can view it, edit it, delete it. I can select it and delete it if you were doing, you can delete from here or delete from here, especially if you were deleting a lot. And you can select it and activate it. So when you activate it, it's going to send it out to the core compensation area. So I can do that if we want to see it. Are you sure you want to activate one new contract? When you do that, there's a question here that they added a few releases back to lock in paper period. If you hover, it gives you the more detailed description that says by checking this box, basically, it's going to lock the new compensation paper period and check the override paper period flag. So if you had it checkmarked already on that screen, if I cancel out of here and view this record, this override, or down here, override paper period calculation. If you had it checked, then it's nothing for you to worry about. But if you want to check everybody's very quickly all at once, and you see I don't have it check marked there, then when I activate, I have the option to say, yes, check that box. The default is check marked, so it's going to check that box for everybody unless you uncheck it. If you uncheck it, it's going to let each new contract record activate as it sat here in new contract. So if the box was checked on some, it's going to remain checked on those. And if the box was not checked on others, it's not going to be checked on those. By unchecking, it doesn't clear all of those flags, but by checking it, it makes sure they're all check marked. So then make your selection there and click activate. You get a successful message, and then we could go to, it's no longer in our new compensation maintenance grid. We could go see this under core compensation if we wanted. And we were looking at Jodie Foster. So now we were on position 1, which I probably need an equals there. So you now see the contract that imported from Classic with a type of legacy, and then the new contract that's out there. I don't know what other options I have. So I don't have a whole ton of fields displaying on my grid, but you could either view this and see that this is the FY21 contract that I just built. The override paper period flag was checked because I checked that box when I activated. And you might end up finding it helpful to add the label to this grid, or maybe you already have. But I'll have to put my filters back in when my grid reloads. But that label field where I put the FY21, that's going to be helpful for you to see which contract is your current contract, which ones are old. You also eventually have the option to, you can see this button up here at the top to include archived. Like you also have the option to archive compensations. So by checking this box one by one, or there's, I believe, a mass change script that we have on your fiscal year and closing checklist to check all of those old compensations at a certain point in time. But we have to make sure final EMIS reporting is done and everything like that. So, and then that would clean up your grid. But for the time being, you're going to see multiple compensation records out here once you activate it. You'll see the FY20 and the FY21. So if we go back to the new contract processing area, that is the new contract maintenance tab. Any questions on that tab? One other comment, there is a bug in the software right now. if you are activating like your teacher pay group and you have 100 or 200 teachers, when you have all of those new contracts displayed here and you check the box to select them all, there's a bug that it's only going to select the first 50 unless you scroll down to the bottom of your grid, which I'll try to show you that as we build more people in here. But if you are activating, first scroll all the way to the bottom of your grid, then select all and then activate. If you've scrolled to the bottom of your grid, it loads everybody and then it's going to activate everybody at once. If not, if you've never scrolled to the bottom of the grid right before you click activate, it's only going to select the first 50 and you'd have to activate the next 50, with another activate button clicking. But that's just a comment that they do have a bug right now. They have an issue open to get it fixed. But if you are working on this soon before they fix the bug, that's just a tip. So on the mass copy compensations tab, this is similar to the build option in Classic. So you can quickly build contracts for many employees at once. You can do it based on pay group. You can do it based on like when the compensation record is active to exclude like jobs that are no longer active. You can include archived employees or not. You can pick based on job status. So if we just want to see how this functions, we will go ahead and pick one of our pay groups and we'll say, I don't know if I have anybody old in there. So you can see this is pulling in Jodie Foster's new compensation record at the bottom of this list. As I made my selections up here at the top, it gives you a preview of who's going to get a new compensation record built for them if I click this build new contract button right now. So you can see Jodie Foster is on my list twice. So she's on there for the FY20 contract that's out there and the FY21 compensation record that we just activated. So if I were to say I only want compensations that were active as of June 30th of 20, then that bottom record fell off the list. So you can play around with this date. Normally you're not going to be working with like a future person. You're probably going to be working with somebody who left. So if I find another pay group, maybe I have somebody in that scenario. It also gives you a count here on your screen of how many compensation records are selected and listed below. So here on this list, I have some people that started in September, some in August, some in November. If those, I don't have any stop dates on people, sorry for a bad example, but let's say I only want ones that were active as of September because I want to ignore those people. Maybe the August people are not coming back and that didn't work exactly perfectly because I'm not using it right. So those, I misspoke. I was trying to exclude the earlier ones, but they're still active because they don't have a stop date. So those records down below are still active right now. The one that fell off the list was the November one. If I remove that, you'll see the November one come back. But this is just to help you narrow down this list down below to get an accurate list of employees who should be having a new contract built for them. If there's somebody on here who's told you they're resigning and you just need to get rid of theirs, you can go ahead and click build to build these new contracts. And then on the maintenance tab where these new compensation records will be sitting temporarily, we could delete an individual record at that point in time. So if I go ahead and click build, it's telling me that 9 new compensation contract records were built. If I go back to my maintenance tab, I see those sitting here. Now you could delete ones that were not needed or edit ones as needed. So this built based on the prior year contract information. Just a quick build, like if you were on a salary freeze, this would help you quickly generate your contracts or get them started out there, and then you could make the individual changes as needed. I doubt you'll use the mass copy option that much, but if you used the build option in Classic, it functions very similar to that. I need to review the fiscal year end checklist that we had at the payroll roundtable last week. And depending on how I worded something in there, you're probably going to be getting an updated fiscal year end checklist from us, because we submitted a ticket yesterday because there was a comment about the new hire date being updated when you use this build option. And as they looked into that question that we asked them yesterday, they decided that that statement from the manual was no longer accurate. So if you have that fiscal year and checklist already printed, you'll probably be getting a new one from me here later this week. And that comment in there about it updating a new hire date, if I have that comment in there, is no longer accurate. So this build option does not update a new hire date for like subs or anybody that you would need to re-report. This option is really only pulling in contract compensations, and subs are set up as non-contract compensations. So any question on the build option? The mass copy compensations tab option, I should say. Sorry. I'm going to select all of these and delete them just so we have a clean slate to work with, and we will look at the import option. So the import tab is really just giving you the option to browse and find your spreadsheet once you already have it modified and ready, and enter a contract start date if desired, if you don't have that contract start date in your spreadsheet. So in order to build your spreadsheet, there is a report in your reports manager that can give you a good starting point. And on one of the redesign status calls, we put this report in everyone's database. I filtered down to anything that's related to contracts. So you can see SSDT reports that are out here and the one that was imported by LACA. So if you ran this report, the LACA one, before yesterday, then all of the same columns and data will pull in, but the column headers are different. Yesterday, I updated everybody's database because they updated the manual with a new version of this report, which is where we obtained this report in the first place, to make your headers hopefully more accurately reflect the headers as they need to be in order to get the import option to work. So if you generate this LACA new contract compensation worksheet, which we took from the SSDT manual and uploaded into your databases today or after, then you have some query options. So you can filter based on compensation start date. If you want, you can filter based on pay group. And I'll just go ahead and pull in current year compensations and generate the report just so we have something to look at. This is going to create an Excel spreadsheet, and with the updates that they made to this report, it should hopefully have the correct headers for you. If you go to upload this and it doesn't have the correct headers, we will see that here in a minute because we'll upload it. Then the headers, as they are required, are in the new contract chapter of the manual. So here is a chart of what the field needs to be called. And if you're not using this report manager report as a starting point and you instead have your own spreadsheet that you're maintaining, then you can come here and look up the column headers as they need to be. And there's a redesign column header column and a classic column header column. And the redesign will accept either format, the redesign heading or the classic heading. So if you have a spreadsheet that you've always used as your starting point and you don't want to use this spreadsheet that I'm showing you, then your classic headers should import fine as well. But if you need to check any headers, they're out here in the manual for you. And back to our spreadsheet that hopefully everybody sees on their screen now. This is what that report manager report looks like. So it pulled out everybody in the pay group with a 7/1/2019 contract start date, which as I was playing around with this, I did notice that it pulls only that contract start date. So if you had somebody in this pay group that was hired middle of the year, they would not be on this list. So keep that in mind if you're using this as your starting point. If you are comfortable in modifying reports, then you could come in here and edit this report. Or I don't know if everybody wants LACA to edit this for them. I don't know the functionality of how everybody wants it to work. But I clicked the eyeball and then I'm going into the configure filters tab, and it's saying my start date is going to equal whatever I enter. Well, if you change that to be greater or equal, or if LACA were to change this for everybody, then when I generate this report, and I'll do it for the same, I think I did pay group 20, and I'll generate this report. I am going to get potentially different results. Yes. So if you see, here's the first report that I ran, and it has 8 employees in it. And the second report that I ran, where I changed the date to be anything July 1st or after, has 9 employees. So the 9th line that it pulled in was that new contract that we activated for Jodie Foster, which really wouldn't be applicable in this scenario. But maybe if I try a different pay group, maybe I'll have something else for you to see that would make more sense. So here's one. So I entered, if you see, if I go back, I'm sorry, I'm flipping between screens, guys, but I ran for July 1st, 2019, and the resulting spreadsheet included contract start dates of August 1st, November 1st, September 1st. So if I ran this report straight from the report manager, it would have included nobody because it wouldn't have found any matching exact July 1st, 2019. So I just wanted to share that as I was running this yesterday, that I realized that date was an exact match field, and that could be changed if needed, so that you make sure you don't miss mid-year hires. So let me close out of some of these extra spreadsheets, and we'll go down to just using one. So here is a starting point for your import spreadsheet. There are some of these fields that are required. So if you're building your own spreadsheet, you need to make sure that you have an employee ID column, a job number column, and a contract type column. And you see this exported current information. So it says my contract type is legacy. Well, just like in Classic, we had to go through and update the contract type column to be like a 4 or a 1. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. You have to update this column to be the contract type of new contract for the new year instead of legacy or whatever comes out. If you are doing mid-year contract changes by import, then you could do the different contract type, which you would find in the manual. If I go back to the manual, and scroll down here, contract type can be new contract or mid-year. So we want new contract at new contract time. But so the employee ID, the job number, and the contract type are required fields, just like they were in Classic. And then there is a new compensation label field, which might not even be in the resulting spreadsheet. Okay, so there is a comment in the manual, and SSDT mentioned that new compensation dot label, a column with that header, is required if an employee has more than one compensation for a position. So I'm assuming your typical employees just have one compensation record per position, but if an employee for some reason has more than one compensation, then there's an additional column that's needed called new compensation dot label that you have to populate as well. But you would come through your spreadsheet and make changes for the new year. So here's the contract stop date that you could enter that was asked in chat. And update any dollar amounts, any number of pays, update everything like you typically would in your spreadsheet. And when you are done with that, we will save this. And then we will go back into the software and go to processing new contracts. Go to the import new contracts tab. Browse and find our file. Enter a contract start date if desired, but we did have that in our spreadsheet. So I will just click import, and I got 79 errors and no records loaded. So let's look at our file. So when I saved my file, I wonder if I saved it as a weird file type. Did anybody notice what I did?
I didn't, sorry.
So my other thought is, it is saved as a spreadsheet, and maybe I need to save it as a CSV just like we would have for Classic. So let's give that a try. Now I only have 8 errors instead of 79 errors. This is going to be my issue. I typed the wrong June 30th. I'm still in 2020 instead of 2021. So it is giving me an error of value true could not be converted to Boolean. Valid values yes for stretch paid and no for stretch paid. So this equal pays. This could be incorrect, which that's how it exported. But let's first, that's in the hours and day. Let's go back to the original spreadsheet. And change this date to be a proper date range. And we can change this to equal pays yes and see what it does. save our changes in the spreadsheet and we will save this as a CSV. Okay, so 8 records successfully loaded from my CSV file by making the date change that I saw and fixing the error message about the equal pays true not being a valid option. So if I look at my file now for errors, I have none. And if I go to new contract maintenance, I should see them all successfully sitting here. So these are the records that we just imported from our spreadsheet. And I didn't show you, I guess, the label in that field, but that label is sitting there. It was there for Jodie Foster since we pulled hers out, but that should have also been in that spreadsheet if I open that back up. So it didn't export as part of the spreadsheet. I wonder if that can be part of the spreadsheet, the label. So that field could be added to your spreadsheet if you would like to add that FY21 description. And if you don't do it in the spreadsheet, then there's also the ability that we could do it through a mass change, most likely on the grid as well. So if you don't do that option, but if not, we could add a column, new compensation label, if you wanted, to your spreadsheet and then fill in FY21 very quickly on everybody. And if not, after you get this in the compensation grid, LACA could work with you to write a mass change script to update those labels on everybody. So back to the software, you've successfully imported everybody from your spreadsheet, or maybe they're sitting here from the mass copy option or from the 1-by-1 individual copy option. But when they're sitting here in new contract maintenance, there are some reports that are available to you to review the information that you have sitting here and balance information. So if you go to reports, new contract report, you can sort as desired and enter a contract start date and appointment type, whatever information that you want, and generate this report. And this is just pulling, so you could filter this by pay group or something if you wanted to balance pay group at a time, or look at a pay group at a time if you had a lot of information sitting out there. But I just ran it for everybody that was sitting in my new contract. So you could review all the information sitting here to make sure that you've updated everybody's obligation, pay per period, number of work days, number of pays as needed. That is one report that is available to you. There are additional reports in the report manager. So the LACA report, that again was for the extract, the starting point for your spreadsheet. These other reports are in your software from SSDT. So the SSDT new contracts payroll accounts and the SSDT new contract summary report. those are going to help you review what's sitting in new contract right now. So if we generate those, so this summary report is similar to like Classic's new sum, most likely. So it's a nice list for you to glance down, make sure everybody has the right new contract type, everybody has the right number of pays. You know, you can glance down this list very quickly, and anything that's different or abnormal, you know, that should jump out at you. So this is one report that will be helpful as you're reviewing the information for accuracy. That
And
was,
Carrie, it's Stacy. Just one thing for everybody. You have to run these reports before you activate, because once you click activate, they're gone.
good point. Thank you for saying that, because it is only pulling information from that new contract maintenance area. So once you activate, they're not in that area anymore. So thank you, Stacy, for sharing that. And then here is the new contract payroll accounts report. So you could review everybody's pay account information. And the one thing that I noticed is none of these have like a grand total at the bottom for balancing, unless I overlooked it. So if you want this final one on the list, which we'll look at later, that's more of an extract. So we'll see that here in a little bit when we talk about your non-contract compensations for subs. But if you wanted to go to like your grid, we could probably write a report for balancing new contract information from the grid. So you would just have to add information to your grid. Which there is a recommendation from another ITC to do this from the compensation grid, but this information would not be in the compensation grid as of this point in time. So I minimized the compensation information and the old compensation information, and looking under new compensation, there is contract information of contract amount, contract obligation, paper period, you know, whatever other information you would want to pull in. Add that to your grid. The grid will reload. And if I scroll to the right, I see that information sitting out here. And if I run my report from the grid, then you do have totals. So if you had more than one pay group in your new contract grid, you may want to filter your grid down to the specific pay group and then get a pay group total and balance pay group by pay group, or you could run this report for everybody that's sitting out there. But that was one piece that I was looking for, was like a balancing total. So I just wanted to suggest this to you. Or I haven't downloaded all of the reports in the public shared reports library, but one of those reports may be helpful in balancing a dollar amount as well. If you wanted to balance a grand total dollar amount that's sitting out there in the new contract area, and then make sure everything is what you expect. So questions on new contract maintenance, mass copy, import new contracts, or the running of the reports while your information is here in new contract before you activate? So remember, I don't have a ton of stuff in my grid, but remember when you get to that point of activating, you're probably going to be activating by pay group. So you're going to filter your grid by pay group, select everybody in that pay group and click activate. If your list is very long, scroll to the very bottom of your grid, then click activate. It just makes sure everybody goes at once. So then if you are using like that grid report with grand totals on it, then you make sure everybody is going all at once. So let's talk about your non-contract compensations, like for your subs. In order to update their information for the new year, you're going to go to the report manager and you're going to find the SSDT non-contract mass load extract, which every time I come here looking for new contract stuff, I'm just filtering for anything containing the word contract. But the SSDT non-contract compensation mass load extract. This would generate everybody who has a non-contract compensation into an Excel spreadsheet. So from here, this is everybody in your database that has a non-contract compensation. So you have to filter through this and make the spreadsheet contain only those ones who you need to update for the new year. So there's some information that might help you with that. Like you could sort and filter in Excel to take out any with stop dates and narrow it down to just those individuals that you need to update. And I'm trying to think of somebody who I can look for in that spreadsheet and then follow it through just to show you an example. And these are contract compensations, but let me see if like Jodie Foster or Julia Roberts are in there with a non-contract compensation also. Okay, so we will just filter this down to this record and then we will watch what it does as we go through this process. So you'll have a ton of lines in this spreadsheet. Do whatever you need to do to filter to get just those records that you believe will be continuing on for the next year. So your subs, I don't know if you typically look for anybody who was paid last year, or if you're updating stop dates on those records as they're not paid regularly, or if you go from a sub approval list every year, but narrow down this spreadsheet to just those ones that you want to update for the new year. We will save this. And we will go ahead and save it as a CSV. And this is on Jodie Foster's position 12. And I guess we won't save, but I really didn't make any changes in that spreadsheet, so maybe I should open that up and make some sort of change. Sorry, guys. Are you still seeing the spreadsheet on your screen?
Yeah, we see it.
Yes.
Okay. So let's update something in here so that we can make sure this happens. Unit amount, let's give her a raise. Okay. $12 on position 12. That's what we will look for. And then after you get your spreadsheet updated and saved, then we're going to go to utilities, mass load. So this is not in the new contract compensation area. So utilities, mass load, browse and find your file. Make sure that is the CSV. And then your importable entity that you are picking from this list is non-contract compensation. Then we'll go ahead and click load. 1 successfully loaded and 0 errors. If I open my error file, it should hopefully be blank since I had 0 errors, but we'll just take a look. And then we will go find under core compensation, Jodie Foster, and look at her position 12. One thing you notice here, there are not 2 records. Whenever you do the process through the utilities mass load non-contract compensation, it is actually updating the record that's sitting there. It's not adding a new compensation record. But if I view this, I should see that new $12 unit amount. So it was successfully updated. So there's most likely the option, the normal process in Classic to update your subs each year was to re-report them to new hire, which until yesterday we thought was being done through a different option. So it needs to be done through this option. So when we are in your spreadsheet for these non-contract compensations, I will look and see, but we should be able to add, we potentially can add like a new hire column here and then update that to the employee as well. In utilities mass load, we should be able to update the employee record at the same time. Well, probably a second load to update the new hire flag and the new hire date. Or we could do that through a mass change of some sort on the grid. There's not a defined method by SSDT to do that, so we'll be working with you to do that. And if you're making, if the only change you're making to that spreadsheet for the new year is unit amount, another option would be to use the mass change from the compensation grid, which we're sitting in the compensation grid right now. The mass change option when we're on the, oh, I'm in the test database. I don't have it loaded there probably, but LACA has written a mass change script to update unit amount. So that's another option as well if you're importing to the non-contract compensation entity just to update unit amount, it potentially could be done through mass change as well. Some of you in wave 5, we haven't necessarily turned on your mass change script yet since you haven't had a need for it. If you've had a need for it, or if you were from an earlier wave, then you have these mass change buttons at the top. And we've loaded some definitions so that you can execute different mass change scripts. So if you're looking for a way to update something through a mass change, whether it be a unit amount on subs or that label on a compensation record, or if we want to try to do that for new hire dates for subs, then we will just need to work with you. So give us a call. We'll make sure your mass change option is on, and we'll make sure you have the script that you need to accomplish what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So, questions so far, guys? If we look back at the checklist, we've looked at our job calendars, we've looked at the options in processing new contracts for mass copy, for import, and for the 1x1 new contract maintenance, which is also where you activate from that tab. We've looked at the new contract reports that they reference that are available to you. In here, they've explained like a report that you can write in that new contract grid, similar to what we did our grid report. They talk about non-contract compensations, the extract file that's available in the report manager to start your spreadsheet, update your spreadsheet, and save it as a CSV. And then just finally, when you're done throughout the new contract pays, you're going to be activating from processing new contracts, the maintenance tab. So when it was time for this pay group to be activated, you would select and click activate. And so if we need to have another conversation about purge timing, like the activate timing, if you are planned out that you're doing INI-CAL additions for the final pay on the old contract, first pay on the new contract, then you potentially can activate very early and let the information sit out there in the compensation and pull in the right payroll. If you're not doing additions, then it would be best to just activate right before needed, right before that first pay of the new contract, to be safe. And keep in mind that you want to pay attention to calendar days if you're not doing additions when you're initializing payroll. And we still advise that purge worksheet. So if you want to plot that out and send it to us, we'll look at that with you. The last thing on the agenda that I listed was the last pay and contract warning. You should still see that warning message on your payroll error report, just like you would have seen from Classic's CalcPay. However, you used to also see a 1 pay remaining warning message in check update, the pay before the last pay on the contract, and they don't have that warning message programmed in. So if you relied on the 1 pay remaining to come out here and get this already, you're only going to get the warning of, hey, it's the actual last pay on the last pay instead of the warning on the prior pay. So that's just a heads up if you weren't aware of that, but you will have, hey, this is the last pay, at least so you make sure that you have everybody ready for the next first pay on contract.
Carrie, this is Gail.
Mm-hmm.
When we were in Classic, I always ran the report last pay so I could see what the last pay was going to be. Is there anything like that or how do I find out what that last pay is going to be?
That was a local report, so I really don't think SSDT created anything themselves. There could be something out there in that shared reports area, possibly. And if not, then I'm wondering if we can get similar information from a grid.
Yeah, that would have been something that we wrote or got from another ATC.
So sometimes other people have asked for it and it's out here, but it didn't find the word last other than up at the top, last modified, so I'm guessing it's not on here. So that gave you a list of their actual, when they're like, as you were approaching the last pay in the contract, it listed everybody who that was going to be a true statement of, right?
Yeah, it had whoever was on their last pay and what the last pay was going to be, because most of them were like pennies different.
So for the dollar amount.
Right.
So I'm on all compensations. We probably have more options if we go to just contract compensation. So my thought is, and I don't know if this would be possible, but my thought would be on this contract compensations tab, I'm under core compensations. If we could add, if it has pays paid and pays total pays, and if we were to send this to Excel, we could easily see who has one pay remaining. Because there's really not like a field in the software that says one pay remaining, so I think we're gonna have to calculate that. And then I wonder if we can pull also like contract obligation and amount paid and do a formula on that column, those two columns as well, to
You would
generate
need
the
amount
amount.
docked also.
Okay. So if we'd pull amount paid, amount docked, and obligation, and then do a formula for that. So let's see if we can add those. So this. So if we were to take obligation minus amount paid minus amount docked, that'd be amount remaining. I mean, if we wanted, we could compare it to paper period, and there's pays paid and pays in contract. So let's just run this for like one pay group. And generate this as a report to Excel. and see what we get. Oh, I did Excel. It would be better if I did,
Excel data, I think, would be the better option.
right. Okay, so if we were to do this, then we could say pay remaining would be obligation minus amount paid minus amount docked. And pays remaining would be, I did that backwards. Pays in contract minus pays paid. So it would be several steps to get there. I could potentially save this report out in the grid for you guys if you think something like this would be helpful. Like I could take my grid report and save it in the report manager. But these calculated columns that I just entered a formula for, I don't know that there's a way for us to program that into the redesigns, but I could give you like this basic information that I just generated from the grid, and then you guys could run formulas to see who has a pay remaining. Then you could even, if you're comfortable with Excel, you could say like an if this equals 1, then true. Otherwise, let's just do a space. And let's change that to just for, see if I match, we'll match 10. So pretend that these 10s are the last pay. And then you could see all of these people with a true in this column are down to their last pay. But like if I change my formula back, let's say these people's pays paid are 23 instead of 14, then this formula would tell you that those are all the people with the less pay. So the formula columns we can't program in the redesign, but if you're interested in something like this, either you can generate it from the grid if that's helpful and then write the formulas, or I don't know. What are you thinking? Is something like this going to work? Because I guess I did the last pay. This pay remaining, in theory, if we were really down to somebody who was at their last pay, that would be the amount that would be being paid as compared to their normal pay per period. So some people's would be their normal pay per period, and some people's would not be. I mean, typically this would be like, 2, 3, 4 cents off, not thousands of dollars like my example, because I really didn't have anybody with a good example. I could make somebody up. So if these people were mostly paid, see, then my formula is finding like not even cents off. What was Mary going to speak up and say?
Basically what you just did in fixing the amount paid was that's why it looks so far off.
So did I lose you?
No.
You're good.
Okay. So there isn't really something in the software for last pay, but we could try to create something. We can work with you to do that, or if you think you're comfortable maneuvering in your contract compensation grid. So core compensation, contract compensations, add different columns to your grid, generate the report to Excel data, and add formulas. That would at least give you what you're looking for. It just isn't in the nice one single report that we were able to write in Classic. That would be something, since it has like formulas involved, that would be something we'd have to request from SSDT. And we can look and see if somebody else has requested something, because it's likely that if LACA wrote that report, we shared it with other ITCs, or if another ITC wrote it, then we got it from them, they shared with us, so that it's likely that other people across the state were using the same or similar report. So it may already be requested. So we can look and see if it has been. But since there's formulas involved, then we can't really write it that perfectly, if that makes sense. Other thoughts or questions? I think that's everything I had prepared for you. Oh, one thing that I did want to show you that I didn't really know was there. Core compensations, which I guess is where we are. Let's look at Jodie Foster, because we activated a couple of things on her. So this new contract that we activated from the maintenance area when we were building that. After you activate your contracts for the new year, there's this historical context area of the compensation record that shows you the contract change or extension type and the contract change extension source. So if you're researching somebody's contract in the future, or if you wonder like, hey, have I done a mid-year contract change? Was this the new contract? What was the contract from right before this? If you have a big long list of contracts on an employee on a specific position in your grid, this could help you investigate that, because it shows you this contract came from a new contract and it came from this secretary contract that existed for FY20. So I just thought that was a helpful thing when they showed that. I mean, I don't think you're going to use that on every single compensation, but if you're researching something, that might come in handy. And as you're cleaning up compensation records, either for the STRS Advance, or if you're looking at a compensation record and something was wrong on it in FY20, we have had at least one district need to use this already. If you edit a current compensation record, one that's out in core compensation, you have these compensation adjustments that you can create. So you can adjust the amount paid, amount earned, amount docked, pays paid, days worked with a description. So like days worked is an example. If your additions on that very first pay of FY20 were processed wrong and you missed a work day, you can come here and you can change this. So like if I do 1 day worked, like right now behind me on this compensation record, there's nothing. And the description is just for your reference. But if I save that, then that updates the compensation behind me. So all of these fields that are grayed out that you cannot edit, but you may have found yourself once in a great while editing in Classic, you do that by scrolling down and creating a compensation adjustment. There's also the adjustment options that are available under core adjustments if they're needed, but those ones are not related to the compensation. Those are like for STRS days, different stuff like that. So more like payroll item deduction stuff. So just wanted to share those two tips. Other questions from anybody?
Carrie, this is Sophie. If I don't have a spreadsheet that I want to use for my non-contract compensations, if I just want to do them one by one, what would I do?
If you go to core compensation and pick non-contract compensation, you can edit existing records, which would accomplish the same as the import, because this import, remember, it updated the existing non-contract compensation that was out there. It did not add a new one. So you could edit existing, or you can create from here if you want to preserve what's out there. So we had looked at Jodie Foster and we had updated her through that utilities mass update option, and that had updated her record to show the $12 unit amount. So you could have instead edited here and had the same end result. If you only have a few to do, you could have just edited, updated it to $12 and saved. Or if you want a different result than that mass load, you can create a new contract compensation here for the new year and preserve the old one out there. So those would be the two options I would suggest, either edit or create from the non-contract compensation tab. Or if you're trying to update a lot of people's unit amount, like your sub rates are changing, we can help you with a mass change script for that.
Is either one of those, the edit or create, preferable to the other?
If this is a sub job, possibly no. There's probably no preference unless Mary can think of one. But if this is a non-contract compensation record that is reportable to EMIS, then really we want to preserve that existing one for as long as the EMIS reporting period would be open.
Yes.
So if this is an EMIS reportable non-contract compensation, you would want to create a new and let the old one sit out there.
Okay, so like for my classroom aides that are just paid hourly, I would do them through non-contract, correct? So I think that's what they are now.
Okay, so they're just set up and they turn in a timesheet and you pay them as,
Yes.
okay, then yes, they're non-contract, and since they're EMIS reportable, you would want to create. You would not want to do the utilities mass load option because it'll update existing. If you did that, you would want to make sure we timed that perfectly, that it was only updating for the new year and your EMIS reporting was 100% done. And I don't know that that'll line up perfectly. So you probably will be creating a lot.
Okay.
And unfortunately on that new contract, like build option, I couldn't get non-contract compensations to pull in there to quickly build a bunch of non-contract compensations. So you could create here, or you could create, let me see, maybe you cannot create a non-contract compensation from here. You cannot. Yeah, so you have to create from core compensation. Is the only way I know.
Okay.
So all of your teachers' aides are that way? Do you have, like, are your bus drivers that way?
No, the bus drivers have their pay spread out, so I think they're in there as under contract. But anyone that's just hourly, I think they're all under non-contract.
Okay. So you probably have like 50-ish people, 100 people. How many do you think you're talking about?
Oh, maybe 100, but that's no big deal.
I'll make a note just to do a little digging in the help desk or the manual and see if I find another option or submit a ticket and ask if there's another way to create those more quickly than one by one that we aren't thinking of right now.
Okay. And do I have to put start and stop dates on those, or?
They still pull into the payroll based on those. So do you have them tied to calendars
Yes,
with days, calendars with work days on them?
yes,
So I would say yes, you should still have start and stop dates on them.
okay.
But keep in mind what pay period beginning and ending date you want them to be paid in. Are they really only paid during the school year and not over the summer? They're just paid.
Yes,
Okay.
the ones that I would do under a non-contract.
Okay.
So I need pay period dates.
It'll probably very similarly mimic their calendar then, because you're probably mostly paying current, but think about like that period beginning and ending date that you're using when you're running a payroll, so that you want to make sure their compensation start and stop date falls in that payroll's date range. You don't want to exclude and make somebody not get paid if you're using different dates when initializing payroll.
Okay. And then this is the screen where we would put our label also for like fiscal year 21.
Yes, and that's on the non-contract compensation record and the contract compensation record both. So you can manually add it here, or we could work with you to write like a mass change script for that.
Okay.
If you want to do that mass change, it works like you would filter your grid down to a select number of people, and then you would say mass change everybody who's in my grid to make them have a label of FY21. So you wouldn't have to individually edit every record, as long as you could filter your grid in some way that all of the people who you want updated are in your grid.
Okay.
Then we could write a mass change script to update a specific field. So if you have to do that on a lot of people, then touch base with us and we can try to save you a lot of time.
Okay.
Other questions?
Not right
Yeah.
now.
Okay. You guys have had some good questions today. I've really appreciated the questions and the comments and the conversation.
Hey, Carrie, it's Cheryl. Totally unrelated, but if you click on the eyeball on a person and pull them up,
Does it matter, like here on the compensation record, or?
just pull
Okay.
up one. All of that information is so light, and the only way you can get it darker to really read it is edit. Are they going to do anything about that so you don't have to go in and edit every time?
I know
to be
there's
able to
been
read it?
I know there's been a lot of feedback to that effect where a lot of users agree with you. I'll have to look for an update because I do think they have some sort of ticket open. So to look for
Well,
that
those of us who have older eyes and not good eyesight anyway, always have to click edit to be able to read it.
I agree. And even I didn't probably do the best today, but even when I demo, like when I was, when me, Mary, or Pat were training right before your parallel, a lot of times when we pull screens up, we'd hit edit just so everybody can see better. So we completely understand and agree.
And I will second that. That's really annoying. And the other thing that's annoying is when you are on, like say you're typing just a person's name and then, off to the left, you can click on either position, compensation, payments, attendance. But to actually see like their address or phone number, you have to click edit. And that's annoying because I don't want to, I don't necessarily want to make a change on that person, but I need to see that screen.
So you're talking about this screen, Stacy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So like they did add address here in one of the more recent releases.
Yeah, but
and
I need to see birth date or hire date. And a lot of times I need hire date or last paid date if I'm doing verifications. And the only way you can get there is if you click edit. I'm not necessarily wanting to edit.
Because you possibly would like to see a view employee option here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you have to go in and edit every time, there's too much chance you can accidentally mess something up.
Right.
Is my thought.
Agree, because like as you scroll down, you could scroll past a drop down and change a drop down accidentally without knowing it.
Right.
Okay. Other questions? Hopefully this has given you what you need to build your new contracts. Do you feel like you're better situated to build them now? Or you have your plan of attack now, whether you're going to go to new contract maintenance and build by one and use the mass copy option like the build option, or you're all going to import from spreadsheets, you at least know how you're going to tackle this?
Yes.
And if you think of questions as you're working on it, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help. If it seems like something is taking a lot of manual changes, manual updates individually one by one, let us know because we can see if there's a way to do it differently in mass. So, and then if you want to fill out a purge worksheet and tell us what you're planning, we'll gladly review that and try to make sure that you're not going to have days on the calendar that are going to interfere, or if you're thinking about the additions route, to make sure that those are thought out thoroughly to make sure nothing's missed. So it's easier to think it through and have a second set of eyes than to have to clean everything up at the end of the year when you're working on your STS Advanced next year.
If we are going to fill out the purge worksheet and send it to you guys, is there a preferred email to send it?
I would send it to fiscal@laca.org just so that it goes to all of us. It goes to me, Mary, and our new fiscal support coordinator. So if one of us are busy in training or something, you'll get the quickest response if you email fiscal@laca.org.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for asking. Mary, is there anything else you can think of?
No, I think you covered everything.
And I appreciate your questions and comments today, everybody, because I thought this was going to be a really short training because I didn't think we had that much to share. So I appreciate you asking questions and making sure that it was a thorough training, and hopefully it met your needs. So if you have questions, let us know. If not, thank you for joining us. And we will talk to everybody later.
Thank you for holding this.
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Bye.